Hi, everybody. This is Caroline here. I am the chair of International Working Women of Finland. International Working Women of Finland, or IWWOF, is an organization that has been funded in November 2019 as a non-profit, and we have been having a community on Facebook since actually August 2019. We are a community of international-minded women who like to co-create a more integrated, diverse, and inclusive Finnish society by empowering, enriching, and enabling opportunities for all. And today, for instance, is a prime example of that, as our event is public, and we have also male guest speakers, and we have a lot of males also in the audience. So gentlemen, welcome as well to one of our IWWOF events. Today, we are going to be talking about discrimination with international talents who are located in Finland. And that includes discrimination that can be in the recruitment, that can be also in the workplace, or that can be in the private life. And what we are going to discover also is that international talents can also be by citizenship Finns. So in this seminar, we also have Finnish citizens joining us, but they have studied abroad or they have worked abroad, and they are by definition an international talent. And it can be actually also just as challenging for them to be entering the Finnish workforce or re-entering the Finnish workforce after being away for a while than it can be for let's say, foreign-born international talents. I will be your host, and our second host will be Priyanka, who I will let introduce herself after our guests. But let's first start then with Reggie. Reggie, welcome. Would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Reggie Russon, the CTO for a company called eSystems. I also have my own company called Simple Tech Solutions. So I've been living consistently now in Finland for 8 years, and but been coming here since 2000. Because I used to work for one of the largest Finnish companies. Actually, Caroline and I work for the same company. So have a long history with Finland, and quite frankly, a long history with discrimination, as my home country almost owns the rights and patents to the topic. But we see that it is, you can find it in varying degrees in other places as well. In Finland, like most countries, has some issues with it.
But at least we are very pleased to have you here. And you're most welcome. Then we have Tina.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tiina Pienkuukka, and I'm currently doing my master's in intercultural communication at the University of Jyväskylä, and I'm a returnee, so I'm here sort of representing this almost Finnish but not quite Finnish aspect. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Then we have Crystal, who is actually also representing Think Africa ry, which is a very important association in Finland.
Hello, everybody. I'm Krista Spell. I hold a PhD in social public policy from the University of Helsinki. I do study migration with a focus on African migration and migrants' well-being. And also I'm the research lead at Think Africa Women, which will work with Africans and try to promote the interests of Africans in Finland. I've lived in Finland for about 15 years, starting from Jyväskylä, where I did my master's, and then moving to Helsinki in 2008. Thank you. I'm happy to participate in this.
Great. Thank you so much for joining. And Priyanka, did we manage to get Shirin on board?
I see Shirin is here, but I think there is still some challenges with she can't hear us and we can't hear her. So let's keep on trying. But meanwhile, I can introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Priyanka Banerjee, and today I am co-hosting this event with Caroline. I am also a part of the IWWOF board, but as a day job, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the co-founder for Business Wiz. And we are helping tech companies in Finland to be more inclusive in their company culture by using data insights with strategy development and so on. And this topic is really important and very close to my heart, because I came to Finland as an international talent, and based on my experiences, I started my own company, which is related to building more inclusion in the society and workplace. So it would be really nice to have this conversation with all of you amazing guests here today. And maybe we can start the discussion with firstly discussing about what exactly discrimination means in, let's say, in the workplace, or how have you experienced discrimination at workplace? So do you want to start, maybe Crystal, do you want to start with that topic? How do you see discrimination unfolds within the workforce in Finland?
For me, discrimination really is like from the African perspective, right? At times it has always, not really at times, always been kind of cross-cutting with issues of racism, prejudice, which people don't acknowledge, but somehow it just affects the way they relate with Africans, because the skin color, our ordering is quite obvious, and people don't so often identify with us. So discrimination deals with cut across our social lives as Africans, economic life, employment situations, education, is something as African we've come to learn to live with in Finland. If I may just take this and give you like an example, because at times it's not intentional. Yeah. If you go back to your first screen of IWWOF, if you look at the images of the people there, you will not find an African. That is international, and this is an international organization. So it's not really, at times it's not just out of bad mind or out of deliberate action by the individuals, but somehow you just cut off Africans because either prejudice or because you don't mix with them in your social life. But for us, it's more than just talking about employment. And I hope in this program, I'll be able to pass this across, because it involves every individual and not just employers.
Definitely. What about, so we listen your perspective and we hear you. Thank you for your feedback as well. What about you then, moving on to like Tina, because Crystal gave a totally different perspective, but you are from the Finnish origin, but you have been abroad, and now that you are back, do you also see a totally different spectrum? But do you also feel there exists discrimination for you as well, or for returnees in Finland who are Finnish actually?
Yeah, so I kind of I never realized how British I was until I moved back to Finland. And every single Finland on a daily basis was questioning my Finnishness. So my kind of right to be Finnish, or to be part of the mainstream, whatever you want to call it, or to apply for a job and just be taken at face value because my bachelor's is from abroad and my work experience is from abroad. That's kind of like, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting discussion to have every single time I meet a new person. It's like, where are you from and who are you? So like we have very different, I guess, sort of experiences, myself and Crystal. But what I would say is on what you, Crystal, said, that it's not just about the workforce. These people leave work eventually. These people who discriminate, whether knowingly or unknowingly or on purpose or not, they go home, they go to the same shop as you, they spend time in the same societal sort of environments as those people being discriminated. So yeah, it's not just a workforce related issue, because it extends outside of that. It's not just staying in this 8 till 4 Monday to Friday, because those sort of actions or those thoughts carry outside of the workforce as well. So I thought that was a really, really good point.
How about Shireen? Now, can we have you, like, are you able to hear us, or can you say something? Let's hope that we have you here. Yay! Wonderful.
Yay! Finally made it.
Finally.
Yeah. Sorry for being bit late to join. I had some technical issues.
Maybe you can start with your introduction. So we missed your introduction, so it would be nice to hear from you. Yeah.
Right. I can hear a bit badly, so I'm gonna just bring the mic on close to my ear, so that's why you don't see me apart from, I think, my ceiling. Yeah, my name is Shirin Namik. I am from Kurdish origin, but I moved to Finland with my family when I was 7 years old. So I consider myself Finnish Kurd, although I think I don't know how, I missed the introduction, but how many of you've actually been raised in Finland, and the struggles around that, I think mostly relating to your identity, whether you're a Finn or you're a Kurd, and how you fit into general society, but also within the workforce. I mean, I've been away for 12 years. I've been an expat in various different countries, and I just got back about 6 months ago. And this feeling of not fitting in, regardless of your nationality, I suppose. Your name alone makes you stand out. And it was so much easier to be a foreigner in a foreign country than being an expat in your own country. And this is something I think it's been I've started to realize that how much easier it was to be a foreigner really outside of Finland. Because here I think people are really trying to sort of be understanding, and on the sort of surface, everything seems to be fine. But when the person is not seeing you, you face a lot of discrimination. And as I think I've mentioned this before when we had conversations prior to this conference, is that before I left, I had a lot of accounts with private sector, but when I've come back, I had a lot of dealings with the public sector, and I find it extremely discriminating. And it's been mostly based on my name without actually seeing me. I had lots of sort of questioning about whether I'm a Finn. I have even been asked to go to a language test after applying for a course on entrepreneurship. I am a Finnish citizen. I've been asked what's my legal status in the country. And when I've questioned these, I've been told, well, because of your name, we weren't sure. And this is something that apparently hasn't changed because, about 20 years ago? No, 15 years ago, I had a case of where I was applying for a job in Finland, and I called the number that they were looking for a person, and I introduced myself. I got a job interview, and the guy on the phone didn't quite catch my name. So in the end, he just said, can you please repeat your name? And I did. And I already had an interview time and everything was set. And he just basically said, oh, so you're not a Finn. And I was like, no, but Finnish is my first language. And he just basically hung up. He just said, good luck, try to find another job. Mm-hmm. And it went to the point where actually I called the number again with a Finnish name, just to make sure whether there was an issue with my language skills, or, I started actually questioning it. And I used the Finnish name, and I got an interview time, and no issue, got an address, went down to the firm and just, confronted them. And I said, look, I don't really have an interview here. I just wanted to see this guy who treated me in a very discriminative way on the phone. Just want to, you can just apologize and that's it. We'll just call it a day. And he basically, I was told to leave the office or otherwise they will call in the police. And I said, okay, thanks a lot. So I went down to the police station, made a report. out of this case. And I couldn't believe it, but the police officer in the police station told me that, are you sure you want to make a complaint about such an issue? And I think what I was just finishing high school, all I knew that I have a right to make a complaint, and I knew that he has the obligation to take it. So I just told him this. So he took the case, recorded it. It took about, I think, 2 or 3 years. It went to the courts, and in the end, I won the case. But apparently, it was one of the first cases in Finland that there was a court case which was based on discrimination by, based on your name and ethnicity.
And this was like 15 years ago, did you say?
Yeah, something like I think it was 97.
Okay.
No, it was, 99. No, 99 it was.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I think like it has, because recently also, Karo, correct me if I'm wrong, there was this study about the same thing, that how having a non-Finnish name could impact your chances of getting employment, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, this incident that I had was literally proved that, because I called the same number with a Finnish name, I got an interview time, which I did also before, but the guy didn't catch my name. So it is unfortunate, but that is the case. Your name plays a big role when you first introduce yourself. And in this case, when we went to the courts, he was actually the CEO of the company that told me that, try to find another job. Thank you very much. He actually told me that he would throw an X on my head if I ever call this number again. So it went to the very, nasty wording and very violent wording, actually. What his take on this was that reasoning why he could not employ me because of my name is that the customers I would deal with would have a hard time to pronounce my name. They would have a hard time to trust the company that has someone with a foreign name. And this is something he actually pointed out in the court. And to that, our defense was basically that I had done a similar job to which I applied at in his company. We did notice in that case, he had a point there. Whenever I would use my full name, foreign full name, I would not get as many sales. So what we did in the previous company was that I was using a Finnish name that my boss knew. And can you imagine, I got 3 times more sales straight up once we started using a Finnish name.
Yeah, so I think we already have established this fact that having a foreign name is difficult, but maybe we can move on to maybe Reggie, because you have been working here for quite some time, and you also have a good network here, people who have been working in here. What is your understanding of, okay, the first step is difficult, having a foreign name, but when you are in the workforce, do you see also discrimination playing a role, especially in the workforce? And then later, maybe we can talk about also how it would play out in a bigger scenario.
I would say that luckily with the current company I'm with, I haven't seen any issues, but definitely there are stories around. I would say that if you look at kind of the pattern in the 3 speakers that came before me, you can see that the behavior exists really sort of at all levels, because discriminatory practices are just a reflection of society. So whether or not you're in education, or your degree from a outside country is not being recognized, that is quite frankly just another form of discrimination. Or it is your name. And one of the reasons why I'm desperately trying to change the situation in the narrative in Finland is because my son, who is a natural born Finnish citizen, has a non-Finnish Finnish name. And in these sort of things, they actually go outside of the workforce. I know people who have been in Finland contributing positively to society for 10 plus years. They've even been able to be successful in the workplace. And then they go to find a nice place for their family to live, and they meet with discrimination there. One, if they can get the loan and get past the bank, then I have friends who have given full price offers, and the Finnish buyer will not sell to them.
Yeah.
So, this is something that as we look at Finns and Finland, we need to look at from a holistic perspective, because definitely securing gainful employment is one of the first steps in becoming a productive part of society. And most internationals, that's their primary goal, is to become part of a productive part of society. And so then they can have an appropriate life for themselves and their family, and contribute to making Finland or their whatever home country they're in more successful.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think, again, it's maybe good to remind also that some weeks ago we had the first part of this event, which was actually with the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, where they were telling us all also about the discrimination laws and such. And I think that relating to one question which popped up in the chat now, I think the discrimination that happens in the private life, and believe it or not, even as a European white female, I have also had the pretty nasty encounters with the discrimination in Finland. It's very obvious and it's very in your face, and though you should fight against it, and you should be, both from like a society point of view, but as well from a legal point of view, you can actually fight back because it's right in your face. Somebody will give you a slur, or somebody doesn't want to sell you the house for the full price, or somebody calls you whatever name I was called, for instance. It's very in your face and it's very wrong. But in the workplace, especially in the recruitment process, and that's one of the questions also in the chat, it's much more insidious, because you have the platform or portal of the company that you're applying to, and it's really up to the company just to say, thank you for application, we are not interested in you, but they don't have to give you an explanation. And in the case of Shirin, that was very obvious one. But if you think about people who send hundreds of CVs today, they will just get a very polite, very legally appropriate response. And you've got this entire world of unconscious bias, which is very easy for companies to hide behind, because they have that platform, or because they have this recruitment process where they're not going to tell someone it's because of your name, or it's because of your color or sexual orientation, or whichever. So I think that maybe one question to you guys as well is that how could we identify discrimination in recruitment? How do we make it very obvious? And how do we potentially find ways to overcome?
If I may just comment, I would just take us backwards a little bit also to answer the question. I think for me, that's one reason I was so happy, kind of thankful about this EVA report. Because, it kind of brings this discussion out, brought it out that we started talking about it. Because in Finland, nobody discussed these issues. You don't talk about it. Everybody has the prejudices, everybody faces the discrimination, but nobody wants to talk about it, right? It has never been a public discussion. But now it's different. And I think this is where changes actually start happening. Because the person that is behind the recruitment desk or behind this company is a person, like Tina mentioned earlier, goes out to the shop, you meet the person probably in bars, you meet them in churches, in every different places, right? So this is a human being, it's not a robot doing that. And so it really starts from the questioning, searching ourselves. Like the more you hear about it, the more you begin to ask yourself, what actually are those prejudices you've taken for granted? That, you've just not really noticed them, you've not thought about it before. It's just been normal that you employ Finnish people because, well, That is how it is. But then when you begin to hear people talk about it, then everybody begin to ask the question. And then even you look at your workforce and then you go like, oh, but we are not multicultural enough. Or, okay, no, but there's nobody from this place, you know? So I think it has started in Finland, because in some other countries like the US, I mean, this is not the discussion they are having anymore, right? They've gone further than this, but I think it has started. And I think for those people discriminated against, like Carol, like you said, it's not something we could really point out. I mean, I've sent applications and I've had people that have spoken about it, and African name, in fact, that is it just blocks you from anything. So you can't say anything. And for me, what I did, I just gave up applying because I felt like not hearing from the employer and then getting so many no's, actually, it doesn't help the confidence you need to continue to search for work. So I decided to start my own organization and then to start looking for funds myself from my own projects. And that's what I do, because then I have to compete with others, right? But I think the case that there is somewhere, what could help, somewhere that people could go to. Where you could take your case to, where you could talk to, for example, even if it's like, I think Africa doesn't do that kind of job now, but even if it's an NGO that you could talk to, okay, I've submitted so and so applications, I'm not getting any response. I feel my name is a problem, so how can somebody help? Because otherwise, I'm not going to advise anybody to change their name. I'm not going to change my name because of employment. I mean, I think that is getting into the job with a really low self-esteem. If I'm going to change my name to something to get a job, am I going to operate in that place confidently?
I think what I also take from what you were saying is really important is the topic of normalization, like how people normalize the situation by not speaking it out, and there's also the point of intersectionality in there, because when I was working in the previous organization, one of the things was also based on not just based on your ethnicity, but also based on your gender or your age, when it could be so much impactful that this is how it works, you will know it when you are more experienced, you will do this. So there is a lot of things that the discrimination is kind of like not a one-way path in most of the cases. It is combined with so many aspects. So I think really relevant in that way to have some kind of place to report, but also speaking out in your own organizations or in your own personal life when you are talking about this. And Tina, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just sort of listening and making some notes here, and I back up Shireen sort of 100% there that the public sector is extremely discriminatory. There's this issue with these jobs that you have to put into circulation publicly, but there is somebody already pre-selected for them. And that's happened to me personally a couple of times, and that's happened to friends of mine lots of times as well. So I follow this, I watch, I check who gets the jobs, and then I look at where they've worked before, and funny enough, they've always worked along the same circles. So that's like a thing, but that's one of those things you can't really, it's hard to discuss because it's so intangible. It kind of just happens and we turn a blind eye, and it's just a thing. It's just how it happens in Finland. It doesn't have to, but it's how we're choosing to let it happen. So that's its whole own thing. But there is this kind of aversion in Finland to difference of any kind. So be it that you're an international or you're a returnee, or, you know, God forbid you have a slightly different name to what the usual is. There is an aversion to that. And we don't like to really talk about it so much because I think there's this idea that Finland is a very fair country. You know, women have had the vote for a long time and all of this stuff, but actually there's a lot of inequalities and inequities in Finland still. And we're not fully addressing those. And until we fully address those, it's really hard to kind of do anything about the sort of small aspects of discrimination, because they're sort of like putting a plaster on a broken bone. It's not really going to work. So yeah, it's I don't know, because if you have these experiences and you have to talk about them to somebody, the usual response is, especially if you speak to Finns about this, and I know because I speak to Finns about this quite a lot, oh, you're an anomaly, oh, that's not the, that's not all Finns, that doesn't happen all the time. That was just one bad experience. But if you, as the person who gets discriminated, have those experiences on a daily basis, that's not just a bit of bad luck, that's not just a little bit of an uncomfortable sort of societal or working environment or something, that's systemic discrimination, and that we need to start sort of talking about.
I totally agree, because I have been working with companies, and if I say that one of the things is like we are collecting data, and a lot of times we do hear from people that why do we even need this? Like, why are we asking these questions? Or we don't see any problem in our company. So it's, also lack of acknowledgement either that your experiences we don't, but I haven't experienced the same. So taking down other people's experiences and making it like your own, that I have never experienced, even when I am from the same background. Yeah, Reggie, you were raising your hand. You want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a couple of practical things that people can do, because that was one of the questions that's in the chat. Is that there are Finnish companies that are very progressive, and there's a huge startup industry here, and the startup companies tend to be far more progressive, and quite frankly, they know that they plan to expand to different regions in different areas, and they know that they need the different perspectives to make their application or their service more well-rounded. And so when you're doing your homework, whether or not you live in Finland now or you're coming to Finland, look for companies that are, searching for internationals. And I think a lot of those, I would say, newer companies tend to make themselves fairly well known. The other thing is Pri mentioned, I have a large network, and I did that for, for one primary reason, and that was when I first came here, regardless of what my background is and what I've done for even Finnish companies, it wasn't being respected by any other company because I didn't have any network within Finland. And I have a theory that Finns don't buy from and they don't hire people they don't know. So I just started networking as much as I possibly could to get my name out there. And that's a little bit more difficult to do during the COVID times, but it still can be done. And then you also see, based on Pri's and my background, we started our own company, as a result of not being, attractive to prospective companies that really we could utilize our services. And that made it a little bit easier for some Finnish companies to procure our services, especially in Pri's case, because she's helping them with the very thing they need to help them with. I was helping them with GDPR. So there are other Finnish companies that do that as well. But because of my international background, I could help companies that were looking to grow internationally. So there are some practical things that you can do to help you get employed while we work with the government and Finnish society to change the way Finns think about this situation. And one of the things I think is very important, and I've been working with and trying to get through the Ministry of Education, is allowing the different immigrants into the schools to tell their story and their background, in a very positive way, because we need to change the perception that Finns have on internationals. And if we don't start working on that, I think it'll be a really long time before we're able to solve this problem.
I think you started a great like move towards the solution part of this panel, because we have been discussing, and definitely we all see, experienced or witnessed at some point or the other that there exists discrimination in the society itself. Of course, that manifests in the workforce also, but then how to go about it. And most of the times, why today we put this panel was one of the reasons as well, that we wanted to bring in ideas from the international talents or people themselves answering what they would like to do or how they would like to solve this issue. So maybe we can go on towards that. And I see Shireen and Tina raising their hands. So maybe I give the stage to Shireen. If you could like, from your point of view, what could be the solutions to this? Like how we can start moving this discussion from acknowledgement to solution. Like how do we solve this on a long term? Of course, it's not a short fix. So what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I think Reggie had a great point there. After being away for so long and coming back and seeing if there was any change, how we are perceived here. And I think this whole notion of not being able to be employed, many foreigners tend to open a business. And I think that is one of the ways maybe to try to be more attractive, as Reggie said. It's a long process. But unfortunately, even with when you open a business, I think there is the notion of very deep in the culture, I suppose, somehow, because I just opened the business like about 6 months ago. And now I have got a lot of sort of feedback on how, foreigners don't pay the full taxes. We do, under the table business, which obviously brings its own challenge then, because there is a notion of also the foreign business owners in Finland, where we have very little good examples brought in the media, especially good examples of foreigners with successful businesses, and examples of how to be a good advisors on this matter as well.
I will quickly interrupt you just to let everyone know there's over 10,000 immigrant entrepreneurs in Finland. We bring in 2.5 billion in revenue every year.
Exactly. And I think that is one of the things I hope there would be more examples of it, because for me, I wasn't aware of how many great businesses there are in Finland that are run by foreigners, but it's not out there. I think these good examples would be one way to definitely open a big door that we know how to work, we know how to run a business, and just bring those examples. I think that would be at least a small step forward that could potentially open the doors. And just going back to Tina's point as well, very quickly, is what I mentioned about the public sector. I think there is quite a bit of this tick the box effect. Well, we are not racist because we have employed foreigners, mostly on the public sectors. When a foreigner is being employed, is to help another foreigner. So you have people, translators, you have people that are working directly with migrants. So the public sector sort of puts that under the carpet because they are not racist, because they have actually employed foreign people. But you don't actually see foreigners in the jobs that could be potentially done by a Finnish person, a Finnish born. I think that is another area that needs to be worked on. The public sector needs to be educated as well.
Yeah, education, definitely. What about you, Tina? You have been raising your hand for quite some time as well.
Yeah, so a couple of things came to mind. I kind of get the practical aspects that can be done, so like networking and stuff, but I still feel like the international shouldn't have to be working 3 times harder than the rest of society to come to this kind of common ground where we can all live together and in 2021 sort of not have discrimination just out there openly. So I think like having to network in order to get a basic cleaning job, and I've heard this from people, just to get a basic cleaning job, that should be something that, you know, a person who is able to do cleaning should be able to like get. There's enough cleaning jobs out there. But to have to network and to have to pull strings and to have to do this stuff, I don't think that's the sort of, that's not the sign of like a working society for me. So I think there's a lot there that needs to be done where like people's attitudes, like Finnish people's attitudes do need to be challenged, and they need to be actively challenged. But obviously that is something practical that internationals can currently do. But then also there need to be more opportunities for internationals to actually network with Finns, because most of the time internationals end up stuck in these international bubbles, and it's really hard to get out of it because they're kind of given this sort of very small space in which to kind of have a part of Finnish society to hang out in, but then there's not that many Finns who are also coming into that space. So it's really hard. They're all networking amongst themselves, but if they're all unemployed, that's not going to help anybody. So we need, you know, a lot more Finns to be actively actually then getting into this networking and doing stuff.
And networking, definitely. Also, Crystal, you have something to say.
I just want to point out that in case of the networking or getting into the right network before you start looking for jobs, that at times it's difficult even, because I have so many people that at the point of internship, you still are not accepted as an intern or as a volunteer because you're African or because of your name. And I think one way around that, I think being member of associations like IWWOF, for example. I mean, there are other professional associations, maybe based on gender, based on religion. That is one way that I think immigrants can also help themselves in getting into the right network. And also, but it doesn't really end with just being a member of IWWF, because also at the organization or association level, they also need to network with other associations or cooperate with other associations in different kind of activities. For example, I know IWWF, they were collaborating with Ambitious Africa. It was the first time when it was mentioned to me, I was like, I will not relate IWWF to Africa, but I mean, it was a good initiative, right? Like coming out of that bubble, like they say. So in this way, I think one can actually bridge this big gap between coming into a country as a foreigner and not finding yourself in that network, social network, where you'll be able to probably market your skills or get to talk to people and to make others to understand the situation that you are going through.
But just want to mention one thing before, because you just mentioned about this partnership, and one thing that comes to my mind is also acknowledging the fact that it exists, because for us as well, or with the companies that I work with, the first step is acknowledgement that there is prejudice and bias. And when we were with, like in the beginning, you did point out about our organization, and Karo, we have been discussing that we do have biases and prejudice, and we acknowledge it. But the thing is that it's not wrong to have a bias. I would like people to take action to, like, go, don't make it impact your decisions and how you can improve as an organization or as a person. So, like, of course, from the immigrant perspective, we can network and we can do a lot of things, but from an organization's perspective, I think we also need to make sure that they acknowledge the fact that we need this thing, we need to grow and we need to develop ourselves. And there is nothing wrong in having a bias, but it is wrong if you don't work on mitigating it. Kara, you were saying something, and that I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, as a host, somehow I can't raise my own hand, so it's very frustrating. So I have to raise my physical hand. Yes, all great points. And by the way, we'll do a recap on those in a structured way at the end. There was a very good question, I think, also online concerning the intergenerational aspect of discrimination, and that could be actually workplace or society or whichever, that how do we engage different generation that might have also this kind of, it's not even, it's maybe historical bias. It's not even like necessarily the true nature, but it's just like we've been taught that anything that is not Finnish or anything that is Russian or anything that is this or that or whatever is bad. So how would you advise, maybe Priyanka as D&I expert, you could answer that one actually, that how do you advise, especially in more traditional companies, for instance, like where there's massive age gap, for instance, with the older generation and new generation, how can that be reconciled and how can these guys actually work together in a positive way?
Yeah, I think that the great point, because I was one of the people when I was told that you look so cute and young to be on a stage, which was like, I was 24 years when I was working with the consultants that time. But there is a concept called contact theory, and it's kind of like very similar to what Reggie mentioned, is that when we start bringing people into contact or getting them into what, again, Tina and Crystal said, network, it kind of helps it helps individuals to get past their prejudices or help them understand the other person's perspective. So a lot of times when we see that people are not very comfortable with, let's say, internationals or with new generation, the very easy way is to bring in small points of contact. Like, for example, they can have guest speakers that belongs to different generation, or from different they have different language skills or different backgrounds and native skills, which can help then the employees in the organization to, you know, open up a bit, and they can get out of their fear or, like, you know, this thing of barrier of, oh, I don't know how am I going to talk to this person, like I don't know how I'm going to talk to a 20-something person. So I think that is one way which we can address that thing. Maybe if someone wants to add something to it, like, feel free to. I see Shireen has been raising her hand as well. So maybe we take, and then we can take a few more questions. There has been quite a lot of interesting questions going on. So maybe Shireen, you want to say something? Or then...
Yes. No, sorry, I think I was trying to get my last hand raising off. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so Tina and Crystal, maybe you can add on to if you want to say something.
Yeah, this intergenerational is something that's really bothering me in terms of the experiences of our younger ones. I have a 70-year-old daughter, and when you read about the stories about how cruel, normally teenagers or younger kids, they could be cruel, right? Because they don't have all the moral or the ethical compasses so that we have. We don't have the same well-developed ethical compass like we do, right? But then when they are in a society where there is this undercurrent of this discrimination and racism, and they read about all these articles online, in the newspaper, then there is a big problem. I think one way we can deal with it is also responding. Like we've decided in Think Africa now that if there is any write-up depicting an African in the negative light or in a light that we feel that is totally false, we're going to respond to it at that same level of professional, at that same professional level. Because everybody is reading it, and if nobody talks about it, both the kids, in terms of immigrant kids, they imbibe it in and becomes less confident to defend themselves, but also the bullies, they imbibe it in as more reasons to be discriminatory, to be racist, and so it just goes on and on. So one way we can do that is to speak out. I think it's important to speak out at organizational level, at individual level. When we say this, we need to speak out. And then we need to hold also racist people or discriminatory images. We need to hold them to account. We need to hold them to account in terms of they need to explain to society why they behave like this if they do it. Because my real concern is for the kids. Nobody, if they are not talking about it, and then what happens in the next 20, 15 years, what happens to them if we don't want to talk about these issues now?
Yeah, definitely. Also the role of media, because how we portray international people, which is also one of what we are trying to do at IWWOF, is creating a positive narrative and bringing these stories. Is like, it's not something our fault. It's not it's fault because it exists in the structure. It's everybody's topic. So I think that's something. So thank you for adding that. Dina, you want to say something?
Yeah, just about this sort of ascribed identities, I guess we can call it, where a group of people are told that this is what you are like, you know, the mainstream perception of internationals is X, the mainstream perception of Black people in Finland is Y, or returning, so whoever it is that doesn't fit into this mainstream box, because we love a box in Finland, and everyone, you know, there's many of them, but if you don't fit into one, then that is problematic, and you kind of do find yourself in this discriminated against group quite often, and that varies from group to group. Sometimes you're in the group, sometimes you're in the out group, but so I think it's really important to question these identities that are ascribed to internationals, and to not allow different groups of people, different individual people within groups to be talked about as if this is their entire identity. So when we talk in Finland about internationals, there's this idea that there's just this one type of person, but it's actually tens of thousands of individuals who belong into an overarching umbrella group, in addition to being individual, unique persons. So it's really important to kind of kick back against these, as Crystal said about, you know, if somebody talks about African people in a certain way, absolutely, like, respond like it's so important to kind of say that's actually not fact, that's an opinion that you've sort of
stereotype.
Yeah, it's a stereotype, it's a factoid, if you want to call it something, and it's really important that everybody within different international or returnee groups kind of actively does this whenever it feels safe to do so, because sometimes it doesn't feel safe, and that's the other thing. Whenever it's possible, it's really important to pull people up and say, like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? Because otherwise this just carries on going on.
Definitely. What also Crystal mentioned is like speaking up, which is I think one of the best strategies anyway to bring forward the topics, because at many times, as we discussed earlier, they might not be knowing that they're doing something wrong until you tell them that, hey, that is actually not appropriate. So it kind of brings into that light. But maybe we take one last question, and then what we're going to do is we're going to still hang out backstage after we end this one, and maybe Caro, you can do a
For me, sorry, I've been putting my hands up, and I think because my name is not there, so nobody noticed.
Sorry, can we don't know.
My name is Deborah Johnson, actually.
So can please, we will take the questions a little bit later. We are taking only on chat, so if you can maybe write it on the chat, we can take.
All right, then, no problem then. You don't need to ask.
Yeah, so maybe one of the questions we saw, maybe Reggie, you can take that question up, because I have seen that you have been recruiting people in your current role as well. It was about the anonymous CV. So do you think that it is one of the ways, because we have been discussing getting your foot into the door with your foreign name. So do you think anonymous CVs are a way forward, or it could be one way to handle the first step going into the door?
I think there definitely companies have seen positive results with the anonymous CVs. I know probably 4 years ago, there was an American head of HR at Musician, and he implemented that there, and they had really good results with it. So it is, you know, it's a system, and any system can be used for good or evil, but I think it is one of the more fair systems that is out there. There are other ways that that companies can help themselves. Again, I still think there's no substitute for education and training. So because, you know, we're trying to change behaviors. The good thing about the anonymous CV is it blocks the behavior from happening. but that doesn't help once the person is in-house or, once they've started the interviewing process. So it is a method for getting past the first discriminatory action by name or any of the other things. But I know based on, if you were to look at my CV without my name, you would most likely be able to tell that I'm not Finnish.
Definitely, that's true.
That's one of the other things that comes out there. So
that is true. It's not completely anonymized anyway. So I think it's like you can do it anonymous CV. It is at least a little bit better than having your name as the first bound, like the gap. But again, when you go to interview or you have studied abroad or anything like that, it is much visible. And I think education and awareness and acknowledgement are the only ways forward to go through that questions. So maybe I can then move on to Karo. Maybe you can summarize what all great things that have come out from this discussion. Go ahead. Maybe
yes, thank you so much. And just to kind of like wrap up the recorded part of our event, I think that if I kind of like try to sum up what we've discussed, so I think point number one in this kind of solution-oriented mindset that we have at IWWOF is that we need to acknowledge the issues and we need to speak up, and associations have a very important role to play in that. So if you want to speak up, join associations like Think Africa, like IWWOF, like Ambitious Africa, like Mother in Business. I mean, there's so many of them out there to choose from. Sorry, because the voice is more heard when it's a group than when you're by yourself. Then the second point maybe was that we are encouraging a lot, especially foreign applicants or people struggling to get work, to do the networking, to do the CV the way that it should be done in Finland, the way that cover letters, the way that it should be done in Finland. It's not for us to say that we accept the discrimination and we are not going to try to change the society, but as Reggie said, you do need to put the food on the table and you do need to get a job. So play the rules, but at the same time, we need to work on systemic changes in society. So that's the second point. Then, so working with the ministries and so on need to happen. It doesn't mean that if you start networking, then us will give up. We'll continue to fight, so don't worry about that. Then I think a third point, which was very important, is that the public sector is very vocal about diversity and getting more, foreigners in Finland to help with the economic situation. But at the same time, it's probably the most closed up. And I think Shirin gave a great example that when and if they are foreigners in public sector, they are actually the ones that help other foreigners. So that's not necessarily the best model of integration. Then we had the fact online in a chat, and I like it, so I want to mention it, that they could be also more clear and obvious support from either public sector or from organizations such as ourselves of the companies that are doing it right, or at least are trying to do it right, because their efforts should be recognized. And I think that's a good takeaway, at least for myself, that we should celebrate companies that are doing it right, not only talking about the ones that don't. Then, yeah, that how you can assimilate and how you can integrate and how you can change either generations or sectors or different parts of the society could be by sprinkling or contactionizing. I don't know how Priyanka said it, but kind of like get touches and glimpses of different populations and different categories and groups and backgrounds together, which I think is also a beautiful thought. Anonymous CVs, yes, nays, lots of pros and cons, and that continues to be a debate. Let's say the final takeaway from this for me is beautifully said by Crystal, that we are not born by nature discriminatory beings. We are either taught that by our family or by the society we live in, and it's not a lifelong sentence. So if you recognize yourself that perhaps you are biased about certain groups, or if you recognize other people around you, let's go back to point number one. Do speak up, do educate, do spread the good word out there. I would like to thank our audience who has been on fire in the chat, and we couldn't keep up with all the questions, but it was wonderful. And thank you so much for all joining us on this very sunny afternoon for this important topic. So not fun to be behind computer when there is so nice weather. Obviously, thank you to our panelists and my beautiful and wonderful talented co-host Priyanka. And this was about international talent today. On 17th of June, don't miss it. We are also going to talk about discrimination with your typical Finnish talents, because yes, it also happens based on age, based on gender identity, based on other criteria. Finnish people also face discrimination. And it means that once again, if you're not in a certain mold, you're going to get in trouble. So discrimination is not only just for internationals. We want to acknowledge that at IWWOF. So we'll speak with other Finnish talents on the 17th of June and more on our page. Thank you so much, everybody. And I think that's it for our recording today.